Luke Quaynor is on the table for every other team inside the top 40. But as soon as they let him slip, Collingwood can match. To answer your question about McGuan, like, you're going to get him. Like, Collingwood will get him either way. It's just what it costs you outside that. He's another one, sort of Dacos style, that could go into the midfield for Collingwood and be that like replacement to some of those older guys as well. So fielder too. And think with this guy, think steel side bottom. He's the absolute steel side bottom replacement. One who's more of that old school 194 centimetre Tom Hawkins type full forward.
Chance, we're back for another one, and we've managed to steer in another very special guest. We have a draft expert in Mr. Dylan to the right of us. Dylan, how are you going?
Yeah, good mate. Good mate. I'm really happy to come on, and thanks for the opportunity for having me. Really happy to be here.
No dramas, and we can see you're trying to get in the good books early with the screensaver in the back there.
Yeah, just put on that nice little touch there, but definitely not a Collingwood fan, but happy to kind of come and support you guys. I have enjoyed the ride for the last 2 years with the Pies, so happy to help out.
We'll take solace in the ride then.
Yeah.
I think you've been the most watchable team over the last 2 seasons, that's for sure.
Not for the heart, though. Not for the faint-hearted, brother.
Yeah, the heart rate goes up every time. I reckon I'm 26, but being a Pies fan's probably aged my heart, and I'm probably more like 48. Yeah. But it's always good to be a Pies fan, especially in those close games. Yeah. Couldn't get it done yesterday, but that is life sometimes. Can't always come back. 20-something points down each time. So yeah, we move.
Yeah, no exceptions yesterday. But yeah, Dill, look, mate. So firstly, who is Dylan? I sort of want you to sort of just paint the picture to the viewers and what you're passionate about and what you've brought to the YouTube scene. Because what I've seen, I think you're actually quite a trailblazer in the way you've been going about it and providing a look on the draft, which obviously you'll talk to in a moment, that not even the mainstream media has been able to provide, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's an interesting space, and I definitely don't think I'm, from a content point of view, I don't think that I'm doing a lot different to what other people have done. But I guess from my background, so I've sort of come into this from a bit of a film background. So I'm doing a journalism degree, but mixing it with sort of film type stuff. So I'm probably going down the path more of the visual side of it, I guess. So I'm really trying to provide those like visual anchors and those sorts of things for the viewers, and rather than just pressing record and kind of speaking about the knowledge. But I guess that the part that is missed a little bit with the draft is the people that are actually on the, boots on the ground, actually going to the Coates League games and stuff like that. There's a lot of people that just report on it and get information off other people, but sort of going to the games. I've tried to do some vlogs and that sort of stuff. And I guess that's just something that I've tried to do. That being boots on the ground, along with those sort of visual anchors and trying to make it visually appealing for the audience, is maybe the point of difference for me.
100%.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Like actually getting out to the game, because the stat line isn't always everything, and if you're looking at the box score, it's not really taking into account a multitude of factors in footy. So it's good that you got the visuals, and then you can actually get out to games and see the guys that you're going to be talking about. I think that's a really good angle to come from these draft videos. Because look, we did the mid-season draft, and mate, how hard was that trying to find information on guys? Like, we're actually actively looking for information. And like the Coates League, the VFL, they don't really give you much detail, and it takes a little bit of deep diving. So like you coming out I reckon is a really good niche, and just to get information, because people are hungry. They want to know what their team is going to look for in the draft and who they can pick up.
Yeah, 100%.
I think you hit the nail on the head too there with the looking for the information and it just not being there. And I guess that's where I actually first started coming into the draft space, because I was probably going to go down a similar angle to you guys with just covering the AFL. And you start looking into things like lists and, recruiting in the draft and that kind of stuff. And you're like, nothing, there's not anything major there that you can sort of grab onto. And even when I did the mid-season draft, I was able to cover it from a Victorian perspective, but there wasn't really anything outside of Victoria, because I'm obviously living in Melbourne. So I was able to go to games and stuff, but outside of that, there's just nothing.
Yeah, it's definitely like I said, it's a niche. It's sort of an unturned stone in some respects. the fact that obviously, like we said, you're able to get to the games and you really, I guess, create your own opinion, because as we said with the mid-season draft, looking at other people's content, we're really just, I guess, leeching off other people's word and taking it for what it is. But I guess you take that next step by at least providing some video analysis as well, which is like the niche that's been untouched. We've done that in the past with the Collingwood games, but I think the video analysis in the draft, with the draft prospects in particular, is worth its weight in gold just because of the limited footage available, and to have someone like yourself going into the games. And I just wanted to actually, I guess, extend that out with your schedule, studies, and whatnot. How are you, I guess, allowing time to go to games? Are you going to 1 or 2 games a week? I know most of the games are on a Sunday. So how do you go about, I guess, approaching that? And how do you pick the game that you want to go to?
Yeah, so I'm pretty lucky at the moment because I was living overseas before I came back to Melbourne a couple of years ago. I had a sort of career change. So I was a teacher before this, kind of wanted to get into some media stuff. And I've always, footy's been a big part of my life with family and stuff like that. So my time at the moment is pretty open, I guess you would say, because I've been able just to study, just focus on that, and kind of make videos and stuff in my spare time. And my wife really supports me a lot there. So she's working full time, kind of keeping things afloat there. And I'm able to kind of get out to games. So I'm pretty much just looking at the fixtures on a week to week basis. I'm like, which players do I want to cover? One thing that's really jumped out at me that's interesting, particularly in the metro side of things, the Melbourne metro side of things, is like the private school system. So during the middle of the Coates League season, you get a lot of kids playing for their private schools, and you don't get to see them play footy as much unless you go to those private school games, obviously. But so pretty much it's just a schedule around the Coates League mainly. And the big one is those national championships games, because they're the ones that hold the maximum weight, I guess, for recruiters and for clubs and that sort of thing. So getting to those national championships games, or like checking out the streams or whatever it is, and trying to go, I guess, and that's, I guess, where I'm coming at it, trying to go a little bit deeper and try to find some of those narratives that maybe, people have missed from the mainstream media and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I think in particular those like AGS, like private school games, I know like some other YouTubers that you actually can't film there. They don't let you.
Really?
And like, yeah, so it's actually hard to get footage on that. And I've noticed just a pivot in, just playing local footy myself, that a lot of the talent, like when I was coming through, was like they'd still look a lot at club level. And these days I feel like it's pivoted a lot to more like when I was coming through, like rugby union, where if you don't play in a private school, it's quite very hard to get picked up. Like you have to be absolutely elite to get picked up outside of an AGS or a private school program at the moment. So it's an interesting one as well, because it's hard to get footage there. I know like baseline footy, for example,
they're probably the exception to the rule.
Yeah, I think only like two schools let them actually film, and the rest of them they actually can't go out to. So yeah, it's quite a hard one. But yeah, the Coach League I think the Coach League just in general is developing great footy and getting them really set up for AFL. You've seen guys like Nick Dacos, Harry Sheasel, for example, be able to come in and make a great impact early on. And I think that's from all the development that they're doing a lot earlier than they will have in the past.
And even with those academies as well, I guess.
Which
is an interesting talking point in the academies. I'm not sure if you know much about that. Maybe I'll write that down, Dylan. I might even touch on the academies a little bit later. And then, because that seems to be quite a trendy topic right now, at least in the mainstream media at the moment, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right. Look, actually, before we get into Collingwood and what they want and what you think might be best available to them in a draft and so on and so forth, I've noticed you haven't mentioned who you quite support just yet in the AFL. Do you want to have a guess before he discloses who he might go for without trying to stereotype the man?
Well, I have to stereotype the man. I reckon you're in. I'm going between Essendon and St Kilda.
He's giving me St Kilda as well.
Yeah.
He's giving me St Kilda energy. Purple, though. So he's from Melbourne, but he's got a purple light.
Can't be free.
It's not free, man.
That can't be free.
Maybe doggies?
There's lots
how about you go St Kilda, I go doggies? I don't know if he's Essendon, man. Are you shaking his head?
Can I give you a clue?
Yeah.
So it's I'd call it more of like a small boutique Melbourne club.
Oh, don't tell it like North or something.
It's North.
North?
Oh no.
Oh,
I'm sorry. That's okay.
I guess that's why I enjoyed the ride with Collingwood over the last couple of
Yeah.
years. So when I moved to Melbourne, I actually lived in Collingwood, so I sort of jumped on the bandwagon the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's mate. There is actually a lot more North support than you think, I reckon.
Well, I guess, yeah, my girlfriend's a North supporter. Our toy poodle Beanie, she's a North supporter. Rosie the Bishop and Free, she's a Collingwood supporter though. So we're able to split the difference in the household. So it's a 50-50 split. How did you find that game between Collingwood and North? Did you happen to watch it live, or were you at the Coates, or how was that all for you?
Watch the replay back. I mean, from a North perspective, I was pretty happy, pretty wrapped with how they played. Just being able to see like LDU, Wardlaw, those kind of guys get in there. And I don't know. The first half was kind of just kind of ecstasy for me. I've never seen North. Well, not never seen them. I kind of grew up in the 90s, so I did see them play that well, but I haven't seen them play that well for so long. And against a team like Collingwood, it did feel pretty good, but then also felt pretty shitty at the end when we couldn't get over the line. But yeah, I was to be honest, I was looking at that game more from a North point of view than a Collingwood point of view. Let's say that.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
I guess the overarching theme, positive outcome for North in that case, is they're starting to show signs of belief and confidence in their game, which is what really, I guess catapults teams into thinking they're a winning side. So I think they're going a long way. Even against the Doggies yesterday, they lost by 3 goals. And in years gone by, you'd remember the Doggies would typically pump North by, I think it was which is it the Good Friday that they used to play in, and like the Doggies would just kill them by 100 points in I think 2 games in a row they would do that.
Yeah, it's been a pretty embarrassing few years, to be honest, being a North supporter. Like, you kind of just keep your head down most of the time, especially with those sorts of bigger type games like the Good Friday one. But yeah, I don't know. I think in the last few weeks, you've kind of just seen that, that midfield group now where you've kind of got Wardlaw playing second fiddle to LDU. Wardlaw looks like he's really starting to become like a proper player. And then you've sort of added Sheasel there, who's playing that kind of mid role and a little bit forward to centre. And I think he's more damaging in that role than the role that he was playing at halfback. I think we tried to, at the beginning of the season, we kind of tried to control the footy a lot from the halfback line. So just sort of, I don't know. I think we're just playing it pretty simple at the moment. Just midfield, Wardlaw, LDU, get it forward. And like Teakle's now playing that kind of second forward role, kind of straightens us up a bit.
Yeah, there you go. Well, like I said, real positive signs for North, but onto Collingwood, as the viewers are probably waiting to hear a bit about from Mr. Dillon regarding the draft. I just want to enter this conversation about what Collingwood need in the 2024 draft, and maybe you can add to it. I'll provide my 2 cents, but I think what Collingwood are hopefully looking for, I would like to see, is either a halfback flanker or a winger. And then obviously the other obvious one would be a key position player, because you can never have too many of them. But I understand the risk in going for a tall key forward or key backman. Are there any player positions in particular, or any players that you are hoping to almost replace moving into the next couple of seasons with that 2024 draft? We have a second round draft pick.
Yeah, look, I think midfields, but we're quite covered, especially in the centre. So our stocks there. A wing stock, I reckon our wing stock isn't too bad, champ. I'd be probably looking to see if we can develop someone who's kind of ready-made off the halfback, like you alluded to, because we're having those rebounding lows at the moment, being ranked in the bottom 4 of rebounding the footy, whereas last year it was kind of our one wood being able to score a lot from that. But, we've got guys, Jack Chris, Nick Dacos, who've pretty much fully transitioned into the midfield only. We've kind of lost that attacking ability from defense. So I think if we can get someone off the halfback, or obviously someone to come in as a key defender, if we don't pick someone up in the trade, I think for now we probably need someone in the trade period that's ready-made or off season. Whereas, those key defenders coming out of the draft or key forwards, they normally take a few years to develop. So there's not going to be a right now solution, kind of like what's the ruckman? What's the ruckman? I'm blanking.
Illaroo Smith?
Yeah, like Illaroo Smith. He's going to be a work in progress, right? Like, he's not going to be ready this year, maybe next year, but he's probably 2 years away from actually making a full proper go into the AFL.
Yeah. And Dill, so what do you think, just based off like what you've seen and what you're seeing in the draft, what do you think Collingwood need, particularly with that second round draft pick? And then we can even talk about whether we think they might even use it in the draft. What are your thoughts around this situation?
Well, the first thing is I think they'll use the pick because, and something we'll probably get into a little bit later is like the next year with you guys having a potential father-son, but also the changes to the draft that might happen. So I don't think kicking the can down the road is probably going to work in this case because of the changes coming to the draft. But there is, in this year's 2024 draft at least, the depth seems to be there. So with a pick that you guys have at round 26, I think it is, that's going to be, you're going to be able to get a good player with that. Whereas I think in, some of the more recent years, you might have been falling back. But the difference between, say, the 15th best player and the 30th best player is quite small this year.
Right.
The other thing is what you touched on there, Caleb, was about the just the way that Collingwood are playing this year, because it's hard to tell whether it's been solely a personnel issue with the scores drying up from the back half, or whether it's sort of by design, I guess, because Collingwood, they've gone from number one scoring team from the back half to the 10th in 2024. This is before the Gold Coast game, to be fair.
Yeah.
And their forward half scoring has gone from 15th to 2nd. And they've also gone from the 16th best inside 50 forward tackling team to the 3rd. So they've sort of, I guess it's partly because of some of the key position players that you have lost, like Nathan Murphy obviously going down, his retirement. You've had Mychek out for different points this season. So you've you've sort of migrated the press a little bit, I feel, into the forward 50 area. And I guess I want to throw that one back to you guys a little bit too, in that, do you think the forward half game is something that you've tried to do to kind of say to the other teams, follow us, like copy us again? Or do you think it's something that's just purely personnel?
It's definitely something, I guess a situation where there's a few variables that go into that. Obviously, the personnel. Is it Craig McRae being the trailblazer in his own way and looking to adapt and change the way we play to get ahead of the curve once again? Typically teams, after the season's all said and done, they're always looking to replicate what the reigning premiers were able to achieve. But I guess over the last 4 years in particular, I've mentioned this quite a few times in some of my more recent videos, but the last 4 grand finalists, I guess the last 4 grand finals and the teams in those grand finals were all top 4 sides for defensive half transition. So I don't know how much Collingwood can move away from being at least a top 8 defensive half transition side. I think we need to find that once again to a certain extent. And as you've noticed, our forward half game has improved by far and away. But and that probably comes with the acquisition of Lockie Schultz. Joe Richards is doing his thing. Even Kruger recently is applying great pressure in the forward half, in the forward 50 more specifically. So I think there's that balance of, yes, we are looking to develop that forward half game. And we saw what Gold Coast did yesterday against Collingwood with their forward half game. They basically suffocated us in their forward half for the large part of the game and essentially beat us by way of sheer volume of numbers of inside 50s versus Collingwood, typically known of being able to slingshot and impact their game that way. So I guess long story short, that we'd like to see a bit of defensive half transition back in our game, along with this forward half game we've created, and then the personnel, like Caleb said, Crisp and Dacos playing almost full time in the middle. We're robbing Peter to pay Paul in a sense to allow that dominance in the middle. But then now we're left with John Noble on the halfback flank, and he doesn't have a dance partner, which is why we're questioning maybe is there an opportunity for a halfback flank or someone who's versatile that can play multiple positions, including the halfback flank.
From my point of view, the one that there's a certain type of player that exists in this draft, and there's probably 3 or 4 of them, and they're kind of in no man's land for where they're going to get picked up, and they do fit that profile of being, they're sort of, good users from halfback, but they've also probably got midfield capabilities down the track. So there's someone that you could sort of groom at halfback, a la Dacos, Sheasel, and then eventually move them into the midfield, which I think is probably something that Collingwood are going to have to do long term, because you've got Pendles, you've got side bottom there. The list, I did a bit of a list assessment of Collingwood last week, and I was kind of looking at the amount of players you've got as like elite in the competition, those A grade type stars. So many of them are over 30.
Yep.
And I think at some point, yeah, you're not going to be able to keep kicking the can down the road going for your Lockie Schultz, trading your picks away. You're going to have to put some young, like really talented guys. You are obviously 2025, you are lucky because you have, a player that we'll talk about coming forward. But I've got a few names here for you guys. So for 2024, a guy that definitely could be on the table with your pick 26 is Harrison Oliver. So he's from the Sandringham Dragons, a back flanker, plays for Vic Metro, 181 centimetres. So definitely a smaller type distributing defender. He's got a beautiful left foot. And the Vic Metro coach, just to give you kind of I don't know if this paints the picture for you, but the Vic Metro coach called him the metronome for the Vic Metro team. So that's the kind of player he is. He gives you that tempo. And I think with what we talked about with the back half game of Collingwood, they've it's not just the scoring that's dried up. It's a little bit of the control. I don't know if you guys would agree with that, but you probably still won a few tight games this season, but you don't seem to have that control that you had. And I know that it's not all about the back half with that. It's also from the, clearances and being able to control the ball on the inside and that sort of thing. But I think just having that player that can, I guess, fill the Dacos role that he was playing a couple of years ago and just give you that absolute solidity at the back.
Yeah, 100%. I think North Melbourne have done that really well recently. They've shifted Harry Sheasel into the midfield, and they've said, Zach Fisher, here's the keys to that, I guess, halfback flank ball use, along with McKercher when he's available. So Harrison Oliver from Sandy Dragons, 181 centimetres, touted as the metronome for the Vic Metro side or the Sandy side. I forget which one. But so he's obviously eligible for this draft. Did he play as much as a bottom major in 2023?
Not as much. He was on the Sandringham list, but didn't play as much footy. He's probably more one that I guess has emerged this season as opposed to last season. But definitely he's a potential top 20. I could see someone going for him inside the top 20, but your pick at 26, he's going to be around the mark. And when you try to, I did the Phantom draft the other day, when you try to fit all these guys in and you start adding in key position players, there's always a few key position players that end up getting snapped up inside that top 20, and then it pushes everyone back. So there's got to be, I've got a few more names for you here as well, but one of these guys is going to end up getting somewhere towards the back end of your pick as well. So I think that weighing it all up, you're either going to go for probably that type of player with your first pick, or you're going to try and get a key position player and maybe a back flanker, but it's going to be interesting. So I'll give you a couple of other names here. So you've also got Toby Travalia, Bendigo Pioneers. He's a little bit different to Oliver. So he's still the back flanker type. He gets really high up the ground, gets involved in offense, beautiful kick of the footy. I'm pretty sure he's a left footer. Just thinking off the top of my head. Beautiful kick anyway. He's 188 centimetres. So he probably more fits, by the time he fully grows out, probably be around the 190 mark. And again, he's another one of those players. He's been sort of talked about as he could be unleashed in the midfield, be that sort of big body mid. He's got a little bit of Bontempelli about him, I would say. When Bontempelli was playing junior footy with the Northern Knights, he was more of a back flanker. So, if you got half of what Bont is, you'd be pretty happy with that. But yeah, it plays with the Vic Country side as well. And the opening game, he had 25 touches, something like 600 metres gained. He's that sort of ball mover type player.
That's unreal. We like to see that in the national championships with regards to Toby. We love a left footer as well. We know naturally that there's some sort of aura around the left footers when they use the ball. They've got that polish. So I guess that's a case to be made when it comes to selecting a halfback flanker. Maybe that the old trustful left foot is something to look into. But do you think, Dill, just before we get into some other plays, do you think is there going to come a time where teams will be, I guess, selecting halfback flanker type of players a bit earlier relative to maybe where they've fallen in years gone by? Sorry, give me one thing. I'm just going to open the door for my dog. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Josh is at the door. Yeah.
So I have that problem all the time when I'm recording videos. My dog tries to get in, barking at me.
They just want all the attention, mate. Yeah. She's a North supporter, so
doesn't understand.
As you're saying,
wait, what was the question again?
The question was, do you think halfback flankers will eventually, maybe in this draft, we'll see them get picked a bit earlier relative to maybe where they've slid in the past?
I think yes. So I think we've seen that massively. The almost AFL teams, I don't know where it's come from, but it almost feels like, I don't know if you guys are soccer fans at all, but that sort of like deep lying playmaker, the number 8 in soccer that kind of sets everything up. So like AFL teams have really gone for that. I suppose it started back with players like Luke Hodge and that sort of thing, but it seems bigger than what it is now. And the stat that you reeled off with the scores from back half, that's so important today. I actually did an interview with Champion Data about this topic. I said, is the first year that Nick Dacos came on the scene, and we had players like Jack Sinclair and that sort of thing. I did an interview with a question sort of saying, are they the new, inside midfielder? Are they going to start winning Brownlows and stuff like that? And, they were sort of it's still the inside midfielder. Hasn't really changed. But I do think that that's becoming such a big part of the game that teams are actually having that genuine question now. It's like, do I play Dacos on ball or do I play him on the halfback flank? Whereas I think 20 years ago, that just wasn't even, you put your best players around the ball and there was like that end of question.
Yeah, I think Collingwood set a good template with Nick Dacos where I think in the past, you get a highly touted player come out of the NAB League or the Coach League midfielder and he's not ready enough for the midfield, and they just put him in the forward pocket and doesn't really reach his potential there. Yeah. And generally, your midfielders are elite ball users. So I think that was good with Nick Dacos, where we just didn't leave him in the forward pocket. We let him go the halfback, transition, get up to speed, put on a little bit of size and get used to the AFL level. And then now he's just fully transitioned into the midfield and showed exactly what he did for the Oakley Chargers, and he's doing it at AFL level.
Yeah.
I was going to say that we've seen that with, I think a good example of the forward pocket thing with like a really highly talented young player is maybe like a Josh Rochelle for Adelaide.
Yep. Yeah.
They just plonk him in the forward line and he has so many games where he touches the footy like, 10 to 15 times, just doesn't really get near it. And I think that Collingwood sort of set the trend with the Dacos move, and like North have copied it massively with obviously McKercher and Sheasel. So it's a good move for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And so we've got Toby from Sandy Dragons. We got Harrison Oliver from Sandy Dragons. We got Toby from the Bendigo Pioneers. He's played in the Vic country, did you say? And he's had 25 touches in the national championship. Did you have any other players that you wanted to reel out?
I do. So so Toby, obviously, he's that player. I said that he moves the ball. He's also got the intercept marking capabilities. So he's certainly not like a one-on-one defender where you'd say he's replacing Nathan Murphy, but he's got that intercept capability that, I don't know, I guess you could sort of compare that to like maybe a James Sicily, one of those kind of hybrid medium defenders that's really good in the air. The next one I wanted to talk about for the halfback flankers is Jaden Newen. So he's tied to Essendon as a next generation academy player, but they obviously only get to, as the rules are, they only get to match a bid on him if it's inside the top 40.
Yeah.
So he is available to everyone. I guess he wouldn't be available to Collingwood straight out at pick 44, which is currently your second pick. But if you did choose to take him, he's more of a smaller running halfback. So I'd probably say the player I'd compare him to is maybe an Adam Sard at Carlton. So really good user, really good foot skills, really good speed from halfback. So he gets a lot of drive off halfback, but compared to Oliver and Travalia, he doesn't really give you anything in the air, I would say. And hasn't showed many sort of lockdown capabilities. He's all offense at the moment. And I think he'd have to maybe improve his ball use a little bit better to get up to speed with the AFL. I think in the first big Metro game, he went with a bit of a lower disposal efficiency. So one that'd have to get up. He's only 178 centimetres, so doesn't give you anything in the air. So he hasn't got that sort of, I guess, two sides to his game, a bit more one-dimensional.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite short. Probably more like a Noble type of player where a little bit shorter, undersized. I'm not too sure. I do like, that Toby from Bendigo. that ability at 188 potentially getting even taller. I think that's something that we can see as a medium-sized stock.
Which is handy, considering we're struggling with Billy Frampton and Charlie Dean right now. We haven't, like I said, we haven't found that Nathan Murphy just yet. I'm not saying we're going to get Nathan Murphy out of Toby, but the fact that he does have that ability to maybe be able to intercept the ball.
Yeah, I do see at 190, it's probably not a direct swap with Nathan Murphy or like, a Charlie Dean or a Frampton where they're probably playing taller. But, if you get someone that's about, 193 is probably like, 190 is probably, 6'3", 6'4", I think that's a good size. And if you can be able to ability to break lines and still be quick, I think that's an elite makeup compared to someone who's a little bit smaller, which seems to, from Dylan's analysis, maybe be a little bit more work in progress.
Yeah. And then we've got Newen as well. So,
yeah.
And who did you say, Newen plays for in the Coates League deal?
He plays for Calder Cannons.
Calder Cannons, yeah.
Calder Cannons, yeah. And also in the Vic Metro team as well. So playing off the halfback flank there. There's one more that I've got in the halfback flanker. This guy's more of a closer to a mid that goes to the halfback flank. Plays for the Northern Knights, Zach Johnson. So he's 185 centimetres. He's really equally as good in the midfield as he is from the halfback line, but he's been that player they've just been able to kind of slot behind the ball. Again, he's got that sort of conductor vibes, like he's just ordering the team around. He's the captain of the team. So I'd say more of it doesn't have any like major upside to him. Like he's not super tall. He's a nice size, but he's not super tall, not super athletic or anything like that, but just like a really good footballer. Like you can kind of put him, I don't know, you could probably put him forward and he'd do pretty well. So he ticks the boxes, just bringing someone in, I reckon, that could, fill one of those spots like a Steel side bottom or a Pendlebury when they retire. Obviously, hard to say that he's going to be that good, but you get my vibes.
No, 100%. And who is he? Is he in amongst the national championships at the moment as well?
Yep. So he played his first game against WA. He missed the first game against the Allies with an injury. Kind of a modest return in the first game of the national championship. So I think he had about 15 touches. Didn't have a lot of meters gained, but it was a game that Vic Metro sort of dominated from the midfield and he was playing at halfback. So it wasn't sort of the game for him, I would say. And first game back from injury, probably adjusting, but he's had some massive games in the Coates League, like that, gets 30 touches pretty much every week.
Really?
Plenty of score involvements. Yeah. Links everything from, and he even gets a lot of score involvements from being a player that plays at halfback. So he really gets high up the ground. And then they'll throw him in towards later in the games. They'll throw him into the midfield. He'll win a clearance, that sort of thing. So kind of a Mr. Fix-It.
Like that. I like that. 30 touches, leadership capabilities. Just quickly before I forget, Dill. So a lot of these players are obviously, for the most part, from the Vic countries and the Vic metros. I'm not entirely in the loop with it, but with the national championships, do they have any more upcoming games that we should keep an eye on as Collingwood fans? If you can recall off the top of your head.
In the national championships?
Yeah.
So the weekend that we've just had gone, so Western Australia played Vic Country yesterday. Upcoming for next weekend, I think it's a double header. I wish I had the schedule in front of me, but I think it's a double header. I think you've got South Australia, Vic Metro, and then you've got the Allies and Vic Country.
Okay.
And then the weekend after that, so that'll be the next weekend. Then the weekend after that, you'll have the big one, which is Vic Country versus Vic Metro at Icon Park.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. Well, I guess that's something we can keep an eye on. And you've given us some names. You've given the entire Collingwood Army some names to look into. And I know, look, Caleb and I are stat fiends at the best of times, so we're going to look forward to, I guess, watching the game next week or watching both those games, hopefully, and getting some highlights and seeing some of the stats around some of these lads that you've mentioned. There wasn't anybody else that you had in mind, or there is still?
There are. If you still want to keep listening to me talk about these,
I want it all, mate. I want it all.
So they were the back flankers, but I did have a couple of players that might be able to fill a different sort of a gap. So Noah Mraz is from the Dandenong Stingrays. He's a 198 centimetre key defender. So he's more of your traditional lockdown. Now there's two defenders ahead of him in this year's draft crop. There's Luke Traynor. Luke Traynor's the real intercept guy. So he does have lockdown capabilities, but He's a very offensive key defender, sits around that 196, 197 centimeters. Then you've got Harry O'Farrell. He's like just a lockdown defender. Doesn't really intercept, but he's good, strong one-on-one. And then you've got Noel Mraz, the guy that I'm bringing here, because I don't think those other two are going to get anywhere near Collingwood's pick. Noel Mraz might, and he probably is more of a hybrid. So maybe he's not as good one-on-one as Harry O'Farrell. And he's not as good at intercepting as Luke Traynor, but he's somewhere in between, if that makes sense. And kind of someone that's seen as a more of a long-term prospect. So he's not hitting the heights of those other two in his age now, but has the potential in the next couple of years. So he's more of a project player, definitely at 198, but probably looks like the third best defender or key defender in the draft.
Okay. And they're currently 6 on the table. I'm just having a look at the ladder now in the Coates League. 6 on the table, a couple games out from first. And even just quickly on, is it Jaden Ewan being a part of a side that's third on the ladder right now and tied equally first. So it's good to see that some of these players that are falling the second round draft are a part of teams that are doing quite well in the Talents League. I mean, mate, it's a big league now. 18 teams. I know not all of them are playing every game of the year, but it is interesting to note that the Coates Talent League is starting to run quite deep as far as the teams are concerned, right?
It is. It's really difficult, though, to gauge. When you look at the ladder, that's the thing that makes it really difficult because you've got so many players, particularly for those metro sides, or I guess even you would say the sides from the eastern suburbs and southeastern suburbs, they're the ones that play that APS footy. So some of those positions on the ladder are a little bit skewed, I would say. Yeah, the northern teams like Calder and Northern Knights, they don't tend to have as many players playing school footy. So they're banking the wins, whereas teams, for example, like Sandringham Dragons, they're almost playing a second side at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's hard to gauge it on the ladder, and you've sort of got to keep abreast of when they do play their games, how they perform, what are they doing at school footy level, and then it sort of really comes back to those national championships games.
Yeah, brilliant. And Miraz, I would assume, is he in the Vic Metro side, or was he selected, or where does he stand within the national championships?
He's in the countryside, so the Vic countryside. So Dandenong players, they fall into that bracket. So yeah, played for Vic Country. First game against South Australia at Icon Park, I was there. Great performance in that game. So the South Australians have got 3 pretty dangerous forward. Charlie Nichols is one of them. Noah Howes and Welsh, who's the father-son to Adelaide. So 3 dangerous forwards, and Welsh was the only one that really got off the chain who wasn't Raz's direct opponent. So I don't think the others kicked any goals at all. So yeah, does have that lockdown capability, and probably he'd be one that would be able to feel that sort of Nathan Murphy, like match him for one-on-one down the track potentially.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of what we need in terms of like that intercept defender role is obviously covered by our lovely blonded captain, Darcy Moore. But yeah, I think if we can get someone who shows good ability to win one-on-one and lock down, and is he quick off the first 3 steps, would probably be my biggest thing, is because like we get Frampton, he swings back in the key defender role, but he's a little bit slow. And when you get those guys, being a North supporter like Larky, he's really quick off the first 3 steps.
King brothers as well.
And the King brothers are quick, and I feel like that's where our key defenders are getting beaten. Even Moore was way too slow for Larky. Frampton goes back. Yesterday he was caught out of position as well, up in Gold Coast. So is he kind of quick for his size off his first 3 steps?
He is, and he's got that. When you watch him sort of off the ball, he's got that. He does have that lockdown sense in him. I mean, you watch a player like Luke Traynor, who's been talked about a lot in this draft, and he's floating about all over the place. You can see that natural incline to get off his opponent and intercept, whereas Mraz, he does cover his opponent. We obviously haven't had any of the draft combined. We haven't seen much of the testing for these guys, so it's hard to know exactly where they sit in their kind of physiological testing and that sort of stuff. But yeah, he's definitely a guy that can lock down, and he played on Nichols in that game, and Nichols is quick off the first couple of steps, and yeah, had him covered. So he's definitely got that capability for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, actually, the draft combine will probably give us a little bit more of an idea of what those players are looking like from a physical testing standpoint. But it sounds like he's passing the eye test, at least for now. Hopefully he doesn't continue to impress in the national championships. I don't want too many teams getting their tails up and thinking, geez, we've got a slider here. I don't want him to fall any higher in the draft. I want him to remain in that second round where Collingwood might get a sneaky look at him.
That's the tricky thing here, because these guys a lot of these guys I'm mentioning, they're going to be right on the precipice. They're going to be right around that area. So some of them have to slide, so that you're going to be able to get one of them, but maybe not. You won't be having a crack at all of them at the same time.
Yeah, fair. And so who have we got next, Deal? What have we got? What else have we got in the stocks?
So I want to go to the key forwards now, because I think Collingwood's tall forwards are pretty good. I really like Brody Mychek. I think we kind of have to accept that he's just a gun sort of, number one, number two key forward now, right? Like I know was a rookie listed player, but he's just a competition gun, serious player. So I don't think there's as much need for a key forward as maybe some of the Collingwood fans. I've just had a look on boards and that sort of stuff, and the fans. Am I right in saying that you guys are kind of?
Yeah, look, I think early on in the season, we were very desperate for a key forward, especially because we weren't transitioning the ball as well. Because last year, a lot of our balls were going out the back and we were able to burn defenders, but particularly in the first half, we slowed it right down and we're going long down the line, and we needed a big target. I think we could take solace in the fact that, Kruger has had two really good games, had an all right game yesterday. Probably a little bit to be desired there, but I think he can fill that role. So I think if we had this conversation earlier on in the year, it would be like, we definitely need a key forward. And also we've got McStay coming back as well from an ACL. So maybe we don't need a key forward as much as we would like the supporters were talking about earlier on in the year, but it is showing some good signs there. Would you got anything to add to that?
Probably just say I think we probably don't need a prospective key tall as much as maybe other teams do, just because of the way we do play. When we're playing the way we play to the level that we hope for, I think we obviously depend quite heavily on our small to medium-sized defenders, forwards. And then we didn't even have a mixed day in for the most part of last year as well. We had Mason Cox and Brody Mychek as our recognised talls in that grand final. So there's certainly ways to work around it. So that's sort of where we stand. So we do agree, basically, to a large extent with what you've just said.
Yeah. I'll reel off a couple of prospects that could potentially. So I think that there's a player sitting here, Jack Whitlock. He's a twin. He had a lot of hype earlier in the season, and he's kind of been overtaken a little bit by his brother, Matt Whitlock. So they're both these really 200 centimeter tall, really super dexterous at ground level. Like their ground level skills are unbelievable. I don't know. I sort of get watching them. They're kind of bean poles. So they're a bit Tim English when you first come into the competition, and they sort of roam. And I think if Jack Whitlock is kind of available at that pick 26, there would be a temptation to get him on talent, because he has been a player that's been linked as high as the top 10 at different times, but he hasn't done so well in the national championships. His goal kicking hasn't been quite where you'd sort of want it to be in recent weeks, at least. He's definitely a key forward, but someone that has been used in key defensive stocks at different times. He's been used in the ruck, and he's been sort of a big 200 centimetre utility even for the Murray Bushrangers where he plays. So he'd be one, I think, to keep an eye on as a project player. But as you said, like not a huge need for that. Job Shanahan is another one who's more of that old school 194 centimetre Tom Hawkins type full forward. He's sort of a bigger guy, takes a lot of contested marks, pretty good at getting involved in the game. So he sort of can, for goal assists and that sort of thing. But I guess his main weapon is taking a clunk. He'd be one. James Barrett, he's had the most shots on goal in the Coates League, probably seen in a bit of a lesser light than those other two key forwards. And I think James Barrett would be a key position player that you could potentially get with that pick 44, like your second pick. So if you could pick up a really highly talented halfback flanker with your first pick at 26, and then by 44, James Barrett's someone that definitely could be available at that pick. And he's sort of been low key, under the radar, just awesome in the Coates League, like generating the most shots. His goal kicking's been very average. I think he has more behinds than goals. which isn't good, but he's definitely someone that can get involved in the game. And I sometimes look at those things, if they can't convert, but they can actually get the marks, they can get into the right position. He's a nice balance between taking contested marks and being a hit-up player as well. So I think he kind of gives that flexibility that would suit Collingwood and one that could slip further in the draft.
Yeah, nice. What size is James Barrett?
James Barrett's 196.
Yeah, that's a good height.
That's sounds like there's a bit of a, I guess, what's the word? A wealth of key tools available in the draft this year. Is that something we've noticed, or is this just typical?
No, I would actually say the narrative has been that this is a really midfield heavy draft. I think some of the forwards have kind of popped up later. So we're starting to get the rush of forwards, and now it's a bit like everyone's clamoring for these forwards, but they weren't in the picture maybe 6 months ago off the bottom age year. But then I think that's probably something that does happen with drafts a lot too, because key position players, they tend to, they take longer. There's an interesting thing to talk about here with tall forwards though, because in under 18 footy here, like the national championships and the Coates League, they have density rules, like further density rules. So you can't stock, even at around the ground clearances, you can't push players back like extras. You can't put someone behind the ball. You've got to have even numbers across the field, across not just centre clearances, but all clearances. So that's something to keep in mind too. So when players kick bags of goals, sometimes that converting to the AFL can be a little bit different because they've got it a bit easier just playing one-on-one all the time.
Yeah. I find it's a difficult transition. I mean, if you look at other sports, not completely pertinent to what we're talking about. You look at the NBA rules when it comes to the 3-point line relative to college. There is that discrepancy in that transition. You see players who are good 3-point shooters in college level, but then they go to the NBA and they shit the bed for whatever reason that may be. Similarly to the draft, the rules and the games there with the zones, if you want to call it that, and then not having a +1 in the back line. Well, obviously, it really does make it hard to get a grasp on what these players are going to look like in an AFL environment. Because at the end of the day, you've got the players might have the talent and the skill, but how do they navigate around the strategic implementations that teams have to counteract the ability of these tall, upcoming, budding forwards?
Yeah, and it's something that recruiters, I think, that's why you end up seeing so many midfielders and those smaller type players get picked up, even maybe when they're a bit out of position in the draft. Because I think recruiters just go, well, the transition for a midfielder from the Coates League to the AFL, it's a smaller jump than it is for a key forward. And I think they just go, well, sometimes it's probably a bit of self-preservation as well. Like if I want to make a good selection, the midfield is going to show my work better in the next few years than what a key position player is, who might take a little bit longer, or I don't know, it's just a bit, you've got less information on them basically.
Fair. And Dill, just before we move into something that we've been sort of ducking and weaving throughout this podcast, I want to ask you, we love hot takes and putting our name and neck on the line on this channel. So Dill, tell me, you're the recruiter at the Collingwood Football Club. You've got your pick from Hawthorn that Collingwood have, and pick 44 that we have as well. Who are you taking with those two picks, Dill, if you had to right now?
So are we going absolutely anyone in the draft here, or are we going who I think is going to be available? What are the parameters here?
Okay, so the parameters are you have to think realistically where these players might fall, who you think is best suited to the team, the positional needs, all those variables within. Does that give you enough of an idea to work with?
Yep. So before I answer that question, I'm going to give you one more name. And this is the player that in my Phantom draft, I actually I fed to you guys. So with pick 26, I took Murphy Reid.
Yeah.
So he's a midfielder though. So he's a more like a forward of centre midfielder too. And think with this guy, think steel side bottom. He's the absolute steel side bottom replacement. When I actually went in and did the kind of full looking at Collingwood's list, he probably wasn't the player that I thought you needed quite as much. I thought you were probably more suited to that halfback flanker like we talked about. So he's probably not the guy that I would pick, but again, he's that like it comes down to this big conversation that you always have with recruiting. It's like, do I take the best available talent or do I take what I need positionally? And I think, again, and that's what I talked about with Jack Whitlock, the key position player. Like, if he's there, do you just take that? I think that's a really big conversation. What I would do if I was the Collingwood recruiter is I would take Toby Travalia.
And he's one of the halfback flankers, isn't he, that we mentioned from Bendigo Pioneers. Had 25 touches in the national championship as well, and has that intercepting ability. So that's what we're looking at for that first pick that we have.
Yeah, and I'm really looking at that from an upside point of view. I think he's someone that can come into an AFL team, play on the halfback flank, and do really well. He's not going to be Nick Dacos when he comes in. He's not going to be a match winner or that absolute metronome. He's not going to be able to get 30 touches a week playing AFL footy, but he's someone that can come in. He'll definitely be able to play halfback from his first season. He'll be able to play AFL footy, and he's got that ability, I think, long term to be able to replace some of those midfielders that are obviously going to go out in the coming years. Like Pendlebury's not going to play forever. So, and
I wish he could,
ticks that box.
I wish he could.
Yeah, absolutely. But he ticks that box as that big-bodied midfielder as well. If he does make that transition, like he's going to be around the 190 mark. So the perfect Scott Pendlebury. He's really he's a real balanced, silky player as well. So he's not a crash and bash. He's a nice player, but he's got that competitiveness at the same time.
Yeah. And I was just going to add to that just quickly. So with Toby being the pick you take, you mentioned Murphy Reid, who you think is, if he does fall there, you have to take him sort of situation. What is it? What is it that we specifically?
I didn't clarify that well, to be honest. He was what I did in the Phantom draft, Murphy Reid, and he would probably be, I think most clubs would have him above Travalia on talent. Yeah. I'm in that balance of between picking the best available talent and who you need. I'm probably a little bit more towards the player that you need.
Yeah.
So, and I think Travalia, like Murphy Reid's like your pretty standard 180 centimeter midfielder. He's not quick, but he's got really good skills and he reads the game really well, all those kind of things. But I think Travalia has, with the height and the positional flexibility, has a little bit more upside than, say, a Murphy Reid. So maybe it's a bit more of a risk, you would want to say, but let's take the risk. Let's swing.
It's a necessary evil, the permutations that go into the risk that you take a draft. So I like that. And then you said pick 44. Who are we going for, Dill?
Pick 44, I'm going to take James Barrett.
Yep.
Who was the key forward there that I talked about. Vic Country and the Bendigo Pioneers. So most shots on goal in the Coates Talent League. So may not be the prettiest player, but he's the guy that he just gets it done. Like, he works really hard, good at all facets of the game as a key forward. And I want someone that hits the scoreboard and he does it.
Love that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I guess we can't avoid this conversation any longer. People have been waiting kindly for this moment. Let's talk about the father-son prospect in the 2025 draft, Thomas McGuane. Firstly, what do you know about him? What are we hearing? The floor is yours, Dill.
Yeah, so plays for the Western Jets, who are probably a bit of an under-the-radar team. Like, they don't have a lot of star factor in that lineup, other than probably Luca Grego is the one that's most known to people. Grego's in the Vic Metro team. McGuan, didn't know anything about him at the start of the year, didn't even know he existed, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's without having looked at like the under-16 championships and that kind of thing. I feel like it's a weird, I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's a weird system because the national championships, for those bottom ages, you don't really get to see them. There's a couple that get selected as bottom ages in the national championships for the under-18s, but because you've got that 2-year bracket side to it, you don't really get to see, like McGuan kind of has this year where he just plays Coates Talent League footy, doesn't get to represent at under-18 level. So that's a bit annoying. But McGuan, 178 centimetres, he's a sort of, at the moment, he's more of a winger, outside type player, but he's got really good skills and he's been able to, as the season's gone on, he's been able to get just like a little bit better. Started off the year with kind of, between 10 and 15 disposals in the first few games, and he just kept rising. By, I think it was round 6 that he had 33 touches or something like that against the Northern Territory. It might have even been more, 38. He had 38, actually, I've got written down here. Yeah. So yeah, that's obviously a massive game, and he uses the ball so well. So if you've got someone that can obviously find the footy at that regularity and then use the ball really well, it's amazing. And he's the one for Collingwood. I think you have to take that into consideration as well. He's another one sort of Dacos style that could go into the midfield for Collingwood and be that like replacement to some of those older guys as well. So he's really impressed this year in the Coates Talent League, and I'd say, to put a number on it, I would say that he's probably for 2025 at the moment looking around the fifth pick, somewhere around there. He's probably the fifth best player that we've seen from the bottom ages. That will change because it always does, going from the bottom age year to the top age year. So he may, increase his stocks even more, and he may fall back a little bit. But you'd probably have to say at this stage he's looking like he's going to be in the top 10 best players for the 2025 draft.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's good that we saw him play for Keel always father coaches, and he did a good performance the other week, kicked 3 goals in a senior game where it's bigger bodies in there, which is good to see that his skills be able to translate over against big bodies as a bottom ager. So that's a tremendous upside there. You alluded to a top 5 pick for McGuan. What does that mean for Collingwood when we try to pick him up in the father-son? What do we have to give up to get him?
So that's really interesting as it stands because of the potential rule changes, I guess, with the draft. So some of the changes, this is a part that I don't know how familiar you guys are or viewers are with the current system at the draft, but we've obviously got the point system and the bidding system. So those two things kind of work in tandem. Obviously, the 17 other clubs get to kind of dictate the amount of points that you're going to be giving up for the player because they obviously put the bids in. So Collingwood, as it stands, what are they going to have? Something like pick 15 if you look at their ladder position?
Yep. Give or take.
Yeah. So we'll look at the rule changes first, right? So the potential rule changes are no more 20% discount on father-son. So when you guys picked up Dacos, when the Western Bulldogs picked up Darcy, there's a 20% discount to the points applied for the bid that was going to come for that player. They're going to take that away. We're talking about taking that away. The other one is not being able to use multiple picks to get to the points level. So what clubs have been doing, you guys did it with Dacos, Western Bulldogs did it with Sam Darcy as well, is you have a pick, say, around the 20 mark or something like that. You trade it off for multiple picks in the 40s, in the 50s, that actually equates to a bigger points value than the pick 20 that you had. But that pick 20 is more meaningful to another club.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a situation where everybody wins. Teams are sort of stacking picks. I've got it written down here, something that just the draft cachet that Collingwood used in the Dacos pick. It was something like, to match pick 4, Collingwood used 32, 34, 44, and 48, something like that. So they want to scrap that. They want to scrap the ability to be able to stack those picks. And that's one of the big ones. So that, along with the 20% discount, are probably the two things that will concern Collingwood the most. What that means for McGuan, I think that you're probably going to have to use your first round pick on him. You're not going to be able to, trade any picks away, still hold a top pick. So you're probably going to have to use your first pick, perhaps even your second pick as well, to add to that, as opposed to being able to hold one of those early picks and trade it away and trade one other pick away for an older pick. I feel like you need a degree in the draft to actually explain it back to people. I hope I explained that.
It is. Sorry, you good, Dill. You gone. You good.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe you guys could sort of fill in the gaps by asking me questions that I've missed there.
Yeah. Any questions for you off the bat there, Champs?
No, look, I think you summed it up well. It'd be interesting how the AFL transition, what does the landscape look like? If they get rid of the no multiple picks, then, it does seem like that it's got to be a lot harder to pick him up, right?
Yeah. It sounds like it's more like for like moving into it. Dill, my question is, so we're hearing with the trade news and the drafts and whatnot, you're going to have the ability to trade with future picks 2 years in advance, which we haven't seen before, which will allow that in itself is just, mate, that deserves a podcast within its own, how it can change the landscape of how teams will be able to stay relevant or fast track their development or stay within their premiership window. But will that pertain to the draft? So say, for example, we use our first pick for McGuan. Let's just say he's a top 5 pick, right? And we say, all right, we're going to give you we'll give you our first round pick, our second round pick, and then with that new rule with the using picks in advance, years in advance, would we be able to offer so if it's a 2025 draft, would we be able to offer a 2027 pick as well in that?
Potentially, yeah. So that's as you said, that's another rule change that they're looking at doing. That's something Collingwood can do. The other element to that is, even as it currently stands, you can do something what's called going into draft deficit.
Right.
So you can actually do this right now as it stands. So they won't even have to change the rules for this. But say Collingwood didn't have the points to get to McGuan with their current draft hand, they're able to go into deficit for the next year. And then it basically pushes the points that they needed to make up. It takes off their following year picks and then pushes them down the draft board. Now, clubs have tended to not want to do that. Fremantle did it, I think, back with the Liam Henry trade, if I'm not mistaken. And they went in with a draft deficit to the next year, and they had a pick 8, I think it was, in the next year, and it ended up pushing them. There was a number of academy and father-sons in between where the points got pushed back. So they ended up getting pushed down the draft board something like 10 places when it was only a couple of points that they went into deficit.
Yeah. Right. Interesting. So they can slide, and then other teams will take up their initial position that would have been had they not taken that deficit.
Yeah, exactly. So it ended up costing them probably a lot more than it should have. So teams tend to not want to go into draft deficit, and they want to have more control over what they're doing.
Fuck, man, it's such a convoluted topic, man. It flies. I'll be honest, it kind of flies over my head to a certain extent. It's almost like you need a diploma at TAFE to interpret all this stuff and understand it.
I've explained the point system to people, and I say about 3 words and the eyes just glaze, like everything just glazes over and everyone just shuts off. And I even start to get bored of what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And I love that you bring this like, maybe for you, man, that might be a video for you at some point to highlight, because it definitely it's of interest to mine because it impacts our club.
Yeah, it does. And like we're saying, it's information that's hard to find and actually get a good articulate explanation of, and you explain it quite well.
Yeah.
And you're explaining all these things to me, and I'm scratching my head. I'm like, fuck, are we gonna get him? Yeah. Well, I'm in my head, I'm like, oh, you're saying, no multiple draft picks, maybe potentially no more 20% discount. I'm thinking, my God, what are we gonna do, man? I'm gonna give away my left nut to get him. Like, what's going on?
So I'll give you an example here. The team that it's looking like affecting the most, which you guys will probably be pretty happy about, is Carlton. So if the changes come in this year, they've got the 2. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the
Camperellis or something.
Yeah. So they've got Ben and Lucas sitting there. Carlton have already, in 2023, they traded away one of their early picks for 2024 and banked 4 picks outside the top 30, I think it was.
Right.
Yeah. They sat those picks there for the Camperellis, and they're looking at now changing that ability to be able to use those picks. So Carlton are in kind of all sorts with that, particularly if Ben Camperelli, who's the kind of considered the better player of the 2, if he ends up getting a really early bid, like somewhere inside the top 10, I don't think he will go that early, but if he does get one inside the top 10 and then say Lucas gets one inside the top 20, they actually could be in all sorts and have to go into some sort of draft deficit in the following year to get them. I think more than likely they'll still be able to make up the points, but obviously they planned that 1 year in advance or even multiple years in advance to try to get the Camperellis and do it in a certain way. And now it's going to have to obviously change their plans. To answer your question about McGuan, you're going to get him. Like, Collingwood will get him either way. It's just what it costs you outside that.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, with McGuan, it seems like we're going to use our picks in advance rather than stocking up this year, reserving our picks, because even with what we have now anyways, it's probably not going to do a whole lot going towards picking up someone like McGuan, who's going to be a prospective top 5, top 10 pick. Is that what I'm reading?
Yeah, and essentially with McGuan, you're a team that's finishing high up the ladder at the moment, and you're essentially getting a bottom of the ladder player. So you win with that. As far as the changes go for Collingwood, I don't think the fact that you guys haven't had to plan too much in advance here, and it will only be affecting you in the following year, I don't think that hurts. What was your exact question there?
I guess my question is, so it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of sense of preserving or trading away any of the picks we have this year, because they might not necessarily be enough to get someone like McGuan next year anyways. And that's why it might be better to go the route of using our picks this year, and then also maybe trading away or using our future picks to acquire McGuan in 2025.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the depth that is considered in the 2024 draft kind of means that Collingwood's picks that are later are probably worth more. So to trade, say, a pick 26 away for a future pick at this point I think it would be redundant for Collingwood. So yeah, I think they'll try to use these picks in the 2024 draft and then see what it's like in 12 months' time. Basically, they're still going to have they're going to have the points for McGuan. Like I said, the only thing that could really hijack it for Collingwood is if next year's draft, like we start to see a lot of players, and then you've had to give up draft picks later in the draft that you could have selected really good players. But that's not something I think that you would speculate on if you're Collingwood.
Dill, I have a question without notice for you, if you want to call it that.
Yep.
We love doing that in the podcast, but I don't know if it's a question without notice, but it's just that sprung to mind. I like those little statements, but I don't think teams do this. I think there's sort of some sort of gentleman agreement, but I wanted you to talk to a little bit more about it if you had any knowledge on it. But why do other teams not? What's the word? I guess I forget the term, but why don't teams take these father and son products earlier in the draft to get more bang for buck? Call it unethical, call it immoral.
Do you mean why do opposition teams not bid?
Yeah, why does Dacos fall to a 4 when he probably could have gone for a 1, or maybe not the best example, but let's say hypothetically there's a father-son on the table. He's clearly the number 1 pick, but he slides because they know the father-son club's going to match the bid anyways.
This is a fascinating question, and it's actually blown my mind looking at some of the things that have happened in these drafts with bidding. Like, I don't really get why someone doesn't, with Ben Camporeale, for example, he'll probably get bidded on in like the 20s or something, but you could have just bid on him at like 5 and it would cost Carlton. Then Carlton would have to use a heap of draft cachet. There seems to be this really weird culture within the recruiting and list management world where they really look out for each other club to club. It's like all the competitiveness of the game seems to go out the window, and they really scratch each other's backs. I heard a podcast with the Gold Coast recruiter on there talking about it, and he sort of said that it's a really close community between all the clubs. They really do actually try to help each other, and part of that is because they want to get help from each other in the future. They might need each other in the future, but it's also just, I think it's kind of a profession where they sort of have a lot of respect for each other, and I guess they're mostly judged on what they do and not what the opposition does. If you're talking about a coach, if you're a coach of a footy team, everything that you do is in context with what everybody else is doing, right? Because you just got to win the competition. So you want them to be bad just as much as you want yourself to be good. But in the recruiting world, it's like we can all be good.
Yeah.
If we all get what we want. Yeah. So I think there's a bit of like professional preservation, I guess, because if they all do well, they all keep their jobs and everybody's happy. So I hope that answered the question. Okay. It's sort of, that's me. That's really just my opinion on it. I can't really say that that's a fact, but that's sort of what it seems like and the vibe that I've got just from listening and talking to people, really.
It's an interesting one. Like, yeah, a little bit of like a gentleman's agreement you alluded to, and you don't want to be burning bridges where you later down the line, like we burned the bridge with Carlton next year for the picks, or this year, I should say. And then we have to do a trade down the line. That's probably the whole reason behind it, right?
Yeah. I guess different strokes for different sports worlds, and obviously the AFL world are trying to all look after each other, which I find interesting. I tend to go with the mindset that it's a dog eat dog world, but I guess they don't want there is a business element to it, and I guess this is the way Australians maybe more on a philosophical level like to go about things. I don't know.
Yeah, potentially. But yeah, I think it's in a professional environment like the AFL that's so competitive. It's really interesting that sort of thing happens. The only other thing that I'd add to that is I think with the Dacos one, I think that there was an element for example, for North that year who had pick 1. I think there's an element of kind of honouring. So they picked Jason Horne-Francis, and I think it was like, we want to honour you with the number 1 pick. If we've bidded on someone else, we're kind of saying that we rate that player better.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I think that's probably the only other thing to add.
Okay. Yeah. So just going for the number 1 rather than bidding on Dacos for the sake of just trying to get some extra value back their way, essentially.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, I guess, that I was trying to explain before. There's no, like, North Melbourne bidding on Dacos at pick 1. It only hurts Collingwood. It doesn't help. It doesn't help North Melbourne, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
right.
And that's that sort of environment that they're working in, I guess. So Collingwood go, well, basically if North Melbourne bid on him, they're like, well, that's annoying. So we're not going to help you in the future. But yeah, it's still weird, because I would have thought that you'd want to make teams that had father sons who are getting an advantage on you. You want to stab them in the back, right?
Yeah. And just my last question on that deal before we go into the final topic, mate. You've been a legend so far, and I think so much people are going to take great value out of this. But if, say, for example, North were to match Nick Dacos, right, and whatever happens, does everyone's draft position pretty much just go down by 1 and then just go on from there? How does that work? Like, would North just have the second pick from there then?
Yeah. So if North bid on Dacos and then Collingwood match that bid, everyone just drops down. So if we look to the 2024 draft, you're going to have Levi Ashcroft is the big one. And that's the thing too. It's like, I did a phantom draft, and the way that I kind of see it is North Melbourne should just bid on Ashcroft and make Brisbane jump up to number 1. But historically, we've kind of seen that isn't going to happen. So I ended up picking, I tipped him to get bid on at pick 2 or pick 3, just because that's historically what's happened. The other one in 2024 is going to be Leo Lombard, who's an academy selection to the Gold Coast. So it's a really interesting time. Like, we didn't really discuss the Northern Academies much as well, but that's another topic that probably needs a full podcast.
Yeah, I reckon definitely we're going to have to get you on and talk about the academies. I think, again, there's a lot of like philosophical, I guess, interpretations from different worlds and different groups when it comes to how people think and work with the whole academy situation. Obviously, with the Gold Coast, and I won't get into it too much because it's like it's a really good podcast and stuff. But Gold Coast having 4 picks within the top 20 last year, thanks to their academy picks, is a conversation that has upset people. But then you can make the case that, well, there's not much homegrown talent in there in the first place. They just had a really good draft. But we'll save it, Dil, because that's a juicy one for sure.
Absolutely.
And on sort of the context of academies and moving into the next topic, we've got a certain Quay in this draft up and coming, brother of Isaac, Luke Quay, currently at the Oakley Chargers, played a couple games in the VFL squad recently. Before we get into Luke Quay specifically, you mentioned the top 40 when it comes to the academy. So correct me if I'm wrong, with the top 40, if, say, for example, somebody takes Luke Quay within the top 40, Collingwood won't be able to match it because the top 40 is protected. Is that right? Or is it the other way around?
No, that's correct. So Luke Quay is on the table for every other team inside the top 40. But as soon as they let him slip, Collingwood can match. So as soon as pick 41 comes around, Luke Quaynor's yours, basically.
Would we need to use our pick 44? Because I know you said you mentioned we'd like to take Barrett in an ideal world. Do we have to use that pick for him?
Well, it depends. Like, you will have to use that pick for him if somebody bids on him between 40 and 44. if that makes
Yep.
So if a bid comes in that small range between your pick, which I'd have thought at the moment with how the draft is looking, that's very unlikely. I would assume, just on what I've seen of the Coates League season this year, national championships and whatnot, Quaynor's probably not going to go inside the top 40. So I'd say most likely you guys are going to have dibs on him, and it'll be a question of whether Collingwood want to take him at this stage. I don't know if you guys have seen him play much, what your sort of opinions are on where he sits.
Yeah, look, I saw him play in the VFL game against the KC Demons. I think he only had, very low disposal count. I don't think he's maybe a lock. Like, I think he just showed. He didn't really show too much to me, to be honest. If I'm being totally honest,
he's just really respectfully. I say this as respectfully as possible, and it's almost it is a good thing in a way. He's just the brother of Isaac Quaynor at this point. I say it's a good thing because if he's anything like his brother as he matures, it's a good sign. But right now, as Caleb said, he hasn't showed a great deal. I think he had one game recently before he played for the VFL for Collingwood. He had 20-odd touches in one of the Chargers games, which he was really one of his breakout games at Coates League level. But outside of that, I don't think he's showing much. He's not showing anything that suggests that he'd be a top 40 pick at the very least.
It's an interesting one because he's playing with Oakley, and I'm, again, not sure how much you guys are following the Coates League, but they're sort of having a diabolical season, I would say. Like, they've had some 100-point losses this season. They have that problem of losing players to APS, but that hasn't really been their problem. Like, they've just been a bit of a mess this season. So that obviously can't help him for stability and that sort of thing. The games that I've watched him, there was one in Preston against the Northern Knights, and his first quarter was unbelievable. Like, I think he took 4 intercept marks. What is he, 180 centimeters? So he's not like key position height. Was reading the ball. He was flying in the air, taking like pack marks, like that kind of thing. And then he barely got a kick for the next 3 quarters. And outside of that one quarter where I was like, oh, this guy's, he's going to be coming hard now in the draft. Outside of that, I haven't seen much. He played a game. There's a team that they put together for the mid-season draft called the Young Guns. And they give a few Vic Metro boys. They put a Vic Metro team together to play against the Young Guns, which is like players above their top age. Yeah, hard to explain it. But anyway, he got a trial game with Vic Metro. Didn't really play that well in that game either. And he's like, if you look at his season, he's sort of built. So like rounds 1 to 3, he went 5 disposals, 6 disposals, 9 disposals, which as a sort of, running sort of offensive halfback, like that's not really enough. And then back into the season, so after round 3, he hasn't gone below 15. So he has found a little bit more consistency in the back half of the year. But if you look at the sort of mids and that like the halfback quality that we talked about earlier in the podcast, like he's just not really quite in that mix, if that makes sense. So like Collingwood definitely could pick him up. He's like on that precipice. He's probably somewhere between the 50th and 100 best player in the draft, but maybe he's more towards that 100 and not to 50, which means that he might end up just getting passed on.
Yeah. Okay. So looks like we probably won't have any drama. And as it stands, there's probably not going to be any dramas getting him to Collingwood if Collingwood see fit by the looks of things. Mate, I think, we've covered a whole lot. What have we gone for? An hour and 20 minutes, and you have not failed to answer any of the questions we've asked. And we're asking as the Pies Footy YouTube channel, but first and foremost, we're asking as fans of the game, fans of the Collingwood Football Club, and asking questions that I'd like to think that the rest of the viewers would have liked to have known. Dill, just before we call it a day, where can we find you in the YouTube scene, and what can we expect from you when it comes to maybe up and coming Collingwood content in the draft world in the next, I guess, 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, so as far as the future content goes, I'll be covering the draft like all the way through. We talked before the show started, we talked about those watch along like live streams. So I actually want to start getting into, I've got a couple of guys that I'm working with, and we're going to try to put together some watch alongs for actually the draft night. We wanted to do the national championships games, but it's probably going to be a bit too short notice. But things like the draft combine and the draft, we want to try to get more eyes on those things, because going back to what we spoke about before, it's just, I think football fans, like, they want to know this stuff, right? They want to know everything about their club. They want to know who they're picking up, who they've got the opportunity to pick up in the future. And at the moment, there's just this big hole. So we're kind of trying to fill that gap. Anything that's related to the draft, I'll be trying to cover. I'm trying to make some explainer videos. I've seen some of your doco stuff that you've done. So using that as a bit of inspiration to do some explainer stuff around the draft too. So anything draft related will be there. I want to get more into AFL stuff as well. To cover more of the from a, you know, AFL lens, I guess. You can find me on YouTube at Dylan Alexander Follows Draft. So pretty easy one there if you search that. But I think I'm starting to come up in the more search. If you type in AFL Draft, it's starting to come up in the search engine a little bit more. Instagram, the same. So it's Dylan Alexander Follows Draft for the Instagram account. But at the moment, the primary kind of content is coming onto YouTube, and it's sort of filtering down from there. So yeah, hope I covered that okay.
100%. Champs, you want to add anything to the great man?
No, it's going to be very promising, excited to what you do in the 3 to 6 months, because it's definitely going to be a one-stop shop for all your draft information, which is, like we alluded to, is very hard to come across. So, you know, I reckon the channel's definitely going to boom over these 3 to 6 months. Very excited to have you on and giving us some great explanations today.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate having me on. And yeah, I was actually, when you sent me the message to come on, I actually, I was actually watching your video with Jesse from True Footy. So yeah, got a bit of a surprise when you got me to come on. But yeah, now looking forward to the rest of the season, looking forward to all these, you know, what ends up happening. There's so much kind of jeopardy in the next 3 to 6 months to play out. So looking forward to it.
Perfect for YouTubers like us still, with all this up in air. It makes for good content, right?
Absolutely.
And we've got him on camera with his 2 picks, Toby from Bendigo and James Barrett, potentially Murphy Reed. So we've got him on 4K, got him there.
Yeah.
We can clip it when he gets it correct later on.
Toby Travalia. Toby Travalia for the five.
I didn't know his last name, man. I just left it blank.
Nice. Oh, yeah. Hey, thanks, Dylan. You're a superstar, mate. Hopefully we'll have you on soon as well, okay?
Awesome, guys. Thanks for that. See you soon.
Take care.